All right, we are recording. I'm just gonna have you introduce yourself to start.
Yes, I am R. Allen Brooks. I write graphic novels and comics for a living and teach writing at Regis University for their master's program and Lighthouse Writers Workshop. And I do a whole bunch of stuff that we'll talk about, I guess, in the course of this conversation.
Awesome. And you've been in Denver for a while?
I moved here in 2003. Uh,
2003.
yeah, I'm from Atlanta originally, and I love Atlanta, but it is in the South, and the South was trying to kill me, so I had to
Mm,
get away from that.
I get that. And
Yeah.
Denver's a bit better. Yeah, well, that was supposed to be a question. Is Denver better? Like how is Denver better?
Yeah, well, okay, so my experience with racism in the South was such that if a white person's race is there, they will actually burn down their own house to make sure you don't get it, right?
Oh, okay.
Whereas here, they just won't help you with things. So it's a more like
Mm.
passive racism,
Yeah.
which is great for me, right? Because it's like if you're just gonna step out of the way, then cool. I feel almost like
Yeah.
Dragon Ball Z. I've used this example before on things, but Dragon Ball Z, I wasn't a big fan, but there was a character Piccolo, the green
Mhm.
dude. I don't know if you know, but he went to another planet to train in his martial arts, but he picked a planet with heavier gravity, so that when he came back to Earth, he could like throw cars and stuff like that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I feel like it was like growing up under the racism of the South and then moving here. Like the
Okay.
same amount of effort got me a lot further creatively.
Okay. I can totally dig that. I came from Boise, Idaho, so
Okay.
Boise is very similar to Denver, although I feel like Denver it's like split down the middle, right? There are like folks who are really trying really hard to get over their shit, and
Mm-hmm.
I still feel like I need to give them books and walk away. And then there are other people who like just don't care and just are like outright about it. So there's that spectrum. Um, and I'm coming from a place too where I had a certain kind of blindness to a lot of racism,
Mm-hmm.
which is uncomfortable for me in another way, because now I'm realizing what it was and then
Mm-hmm.
also seeing it here and like also having to dismantle a lot of my own shit because I obviously have some privileges. So
Right.
I haven't experienced a lot of the stuff down south, thankfully,
Mm-hmm.
um, except for in like tiny in comparison, like, you know, it's been Boise and Denver rate.
Right. Right.
um, yeah. So that's really interesting. That's a really interesting scope. Um, and that's where we went straight to. So now I'm kind of not sure what to do. I've been having a lot of these different kinds of conversations, but I'm gonna let you were about to say something.
I was thinking about when I was I'm also a musician. I rap with jazz bands and different stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. And in 2004, I was on tour with this like small like hip hop poetry. Um, it was just a small tour, and the only place where they misspelled the word poetry on the flyer was Dallas Fort Worth, and they
Mm-hmm.
spelled it Portry, poetry.
Porty.
But it was interesting though because I was there's this rapper Pigeon John who's kind of like he definitely has more of a name than I do, like an underground rapper. But he and I were touring, and he's from LA, so he hadn't really dealt with the racism of the South. And
Okay.
so in Texas, we would take turns driving the tour van, and
Mm-hmm.
like so me and Pigeon John were the only people of color on that tour. And then so basically I told all of them that I would drive in Texas, but not during the day. I would
Mm.
only drive at night. And I think Pigeon John at the time thought I was being excessive about that. And then he drove for an hour, and he's
Mm-hmm.
biracial. He drove
Mm-hmm.
for an hour, and we got pulled over 3 times. you know, yeah. And
Yeah.
so I mean, all of that is what it is. But
Yeah.
what I like about Denver is that it is it's definitely good for my soul. Like if I were coming for cultural validation, then I would be disappointed. But since I grew up in an all Black city, you know, I kind of carry that with me. So but in terms of like the creative environment, the community is very supportive.
Right.
People are not generally not trying to like take each other out.
Right.
You know, everybody seems to really be excited about what each other is doing. And
Right.
yeah, I met a lot of good people and been able to create a lot of good shit here. So
that's one of the things I've noticed too, especially around like the comic community, Denver Drink and Draw,
right.
Think, those folks, when they let the writers come to Denver Drink and Draw, which was many years ago, it was so cool because it was really the first time I had come out of my undergrad habitat where people are in their undergrad mindsets and like, real judgy and really competitive and things like that. Then you go to Drink and Draw and people are just like you said, they're really excited. They're very, there was a lot of sharing. There was just a lot of excitement and a lot of energy in it. And it wasn't, it wasn't every man or woman or whoever for themselves. It was definitely,
right.
And that was so good for me. And it was the first time I had ever seen that.
How long have you been in Denver?
I've lived in Denver since 2001.
Okay.
So almost 19 years. It's crazy. I've never lived this long anywhere.
Same. Yeah. Okay. Well, so that's in the Denver Drink and Draw. So I've always been a fan of comics. Like my father wanted me to read when I was 5, and he bought me The Flash.
Nice.
And just got me into comics, right? And so my entire life, and then when I was around 10, my mother found an ad for a comic convention in the paper and was like, "Do you think you'd be interested in going to this?" And I was like, "Yeah." So she just dropped me and my friend off. And back then, comic conventions were like 200, 300 people.
Yeah.
And me and my friend went, and we were not only the only Black people, but also the only children.
Oh, dang.
Yeah,
oh, shoot.
Yeah, it was just basically a whole bunch of white dudes, very few women. And it was cool, but it was great because comics were not popular. So
right.
It was the 1 or 2 times a year that we could come together with people who loved all of these characters that we love. Mm-hmm. And the community was very embracing and supportive, which was dope.
Right.
But I had always just been a reader, and I actually thought I was going to be an artist until maybe I was like 12, 13. I got into hip hop, and hip hop waylaid me. And so I stopped drawing. But in about 2010, I had a painful breakup. And so I was trying to fill the time, and somebody told me about Denver Drink and Draw.
Nice.
So I just showed up, and I kind of ended up connecting with a lot of the comics community people here. And I was just doodling with them for years.
Yeah.
And then I eventually decided I would try and write, some comics, and here we are now.
Yeah, here we are. Like, you have multiple projects going on right now.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah. So I tell you, like with music, I got really burned out. I was doing maybe 60 shows a year.
Holy cats, that's pretty busy.
Yeah. And I was hiring musicians to back me up. Mm-hmm. So I would perform places like Dazzle, Walnut Room, Ophelia's, Herbs, just different places, right? And
yeah, all the good ones.
Right. And these some of the musicians just had bad attitudes, right? Like they would get all they had to do was show up to a rehearsal and a show, and they would get paid. Now a lot of them were paying the rent off of the gigs that I was booking, but then they would just be mad. I would book the gig, I would set the playlist, I would lead the rehearsals, I would write a lot of songs, I would design the posters, I would put the flyers all over the city, I would do all the online promotion.
None of them helped.
Yeah, and then I would get to the show, and then they would have an attitude, and it just stressed me out after a while, So
and you were paying them. Yeah.
Right. So eventually I got burned out, and I was like, man, for all this stress, I could be doing something that actually makes me money, you know. And so I quit doing music for a while and started an insurance agency, which
What?
was, yeah, I know. And that was like the most square thing I've ever done. But I did that for 4 years. And I did okay at it. But
Yeah.
the things that I learned from it were building sales and personal like relationships with other professionals. Because like before that, networking seemed very false and contrived to me. But I had to learn how to do it for this business, and you know. And so, but what burned me out on insurance was towards the end, I was selling health insurance, right? And so when you're selling health insurance to people, they'll be like, when you're selling it, they'll be like, hey, can we take this off? Can we take this policy off? And I'll be like, yes, but if something happens, you're not going to have this coverage. And they'll be like, oh, I don't need it. And then 6 months later, something will happen, and they'll be furious with me that they don't have the coverage that they took off, right?
Yeah.
And so even though intellectually I knew it wasn't my fault, it was still emotionally very hard for me to have people angry with me for something I don't even give a fuck about. Like, I don't care about insurance,
Right.
you know, like be mad at me about, you know, something I write or something I actually believe in, but like insurance. So I had saved up a little money and I quit and I went to Europe for the first time.
Oh, where did you
And
land?
I went to Berlin. And I
Okay.
spent a month going from place to place. So I spent a week in Berlin, a week in Prague, a week in Budapest, and then I went to a small comic book convention in England, about 3 hours west of London. It was called Melksham, M-E-L-K, Melksham. And because I was like, I definitely got to go to a comic book convention while I'm out here, right?
Right.
And so it was dope. Like I had never been, you know, like I said, I went by myself. I spent a month, and I did comic book stuff. Like in Berlin, I interviewed a guy who owns 3 comic book stores, and then I bought comics in all the languages of the places that I went. You know,
Awesome.
but in Budapest was the only place I didn't buy comics because that dude was a dick, and there was only one store and he was just rude. So I was like, oh man, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
But it was really, it sort of opened my eyes to the world, right? And all the people there in all those countries really embraced me. And it was this weird realization for me that I realized that most people in most places like me, but I just happened to grow up in the one place where people didn't. So my expectation is that people will not like me. So I was like, I don't know how to feel about Black people in these other countries. I don't know how to feel, you know, like just all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was a good experience for me. But it also made me think about, okay, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? Like, do I want insurance to be in my obituary, you know? And so I decided I was really going to try and make a strong attempt at writing comics. And that was 2016.
And so,
yeah.
sorry.
No, please. I feel like I'm training.
Yeah, that's what I've been wondering about that. Like how, so kind of the roll up, the snowball has been kind of happening pretty quick then. Like,
yeah.
so you made that decision.
Yeah, because 2016, I took that trip, and that was like the summer of 2016. And I had already been trying to do, like I was setting up a Kickstarter for the Burning Metronome.
Yeah.
And so.
Was it that long ago?
It came out like it was done in 2017. But yeah, that's when that Kickstarter was, 2016. So it's been 4 years. But here's the funny thing. Okay, so when I was in Budapest, I stayed in this hostel called the Red Fox Party Hostel, which was falsely named because there was no kind of party in that place. But in Berlin, I lost my iPhone. In Prague, I dropped my laptop, so I had no way to connect to the internet.
Okay.
But I was supposed to do an interview with Westward about the Burning Metronome Kickstarter while I was in Budapest. So in the hostel, they had 2 computers, like just 2. And so I made sure that I got like, so my interview was scheduled for noon Denver time, which was 8 p.m. there.
Mm-hmm.
So I go out at like 7 to make sure that I get a computer, right?
Right.
And when I come out, they are doing maintenance on the computer, on like the internet. Yeah. So I was like, oh man, okay. So I had made some friends in Prague who were staying at another place down the street in Budapest. So I run down the street to their hostel and go into their computer area and try to download Skype where the interview is supposed to have. So first I go in, there's no Skype. So then I try to download it. It says you're not an admin.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can't ask the people who work there to help me because I'm not actually staying there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then I run down the street back to mine and I say, hey, listen, I'm not trying to rush you guys, but how long do you think it'll be before your computers are on? And that guy says, 10 minutes, my friend.
Oh.
And so it's like 7:30 at this point. So I was like, cool. So I sit down, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. So now it's 8:10. So now I'm 10 minutes late and they get everything back on. So I log into Skype and the reporter's there and my colleague at the time on the book, Matt Strackbine, who did letters and book design and colors, he was on. And for some reason, the artist, the guy who was doing the pencils and inks, he wasn't on the call. So I log in and for some reason I can't make the audio work. I can hear them, but they can't hear me.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So
What?
I was like, what is happening? Right. So then they asked me questions and I have to type my responses, but it's on a Hungarian keyboard. So all the letters are moved around. So I was like, this is going to be a terrible interview.
Oh my goodness.
But it turned out to be good. Kyle Harris from Westward wrote it, and he had just been moved into like the art stuff. So he had never read comics or anything.
Oh,
and,
really?
Yeah. And
That
he told
surprises me for some reason.
Yeah, well, he told me afterwards that after the interview, he was inspired and he went to the library with his son and picked up a whole stack of graphic novels and read them.
Very cool.
Yeah, so it was a great article. But thinking about all the stuff I went through to get on that call, when I finally got back to Denver, I asked the artist. I was like, "Yo, man, why weren't you on the interview?" Oh man, I took Theraflu the night before and I just slept through it. I was like, "You slept through a noon interview? All right, cool.
Dang. But that's why I don't take any of that stuff, because will I be able to get up in the morning? Whew.
That's a real question. Anyway, yeah, so I came back, we did the Kickstarter.
Which was absolutely successful.
Yeah, we made almost twice what we were asking for, and that really surprised me because I had never really asked people, even my father. When I was like 21, I asked him to co-sign a car for me, and he didn't return my calls for like a month. but for this Kickstarter, he came through. He gave it the highest level. So I was like, all right.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, it's a great book. I'm excited for part 2. Thanks. When did you say that was coming out?
Good question. I say good question because I wrote it like a year and a half ago, but getting artists to finish things, even when you pay them, is quite an ordeal, but especially in comics, because comics are very labor intensive for artists, Right. But it's all drawn and it is just being colored now. Okay. And there was somebody who colored one story and then she had to drop out for other things. So Corey Redford, who is drawing my weekly comic for the Colorado Sun, she's coloring it now.
Awesome.
I think there might be like 15 pages left. So,
that's amazing. Yeah. So that's one thing I noticed too. So I remember when you're doing your interviews, the oh my gosh,
podcast.
My brain, your podcast.
Motherfucker in a Cape.
Yeah, Motherfucker in a Cape.
Yes. And
I remember I was really curious about it, and I kept meaning to get to these things because I was noticing the way you were doing it. Like a lot of people in literary and art communities always grab for the big names, but And sometimes you do, like, I don't feel like you grab for the big names. It's more like you actually make a connection with people and like have these conversations, and then you're tight, and then you do the interviews. But I saw you were making space for people in the community who didn't necessarily
Wow.
have voice and stuff. So I'm like, I gotta go check this dude out. Like,
Right on.
what's he about? And it was really cool. The first one I saw, Thea Hunt was there.
Yeah.
And who else was there at that one? Why can't I remember?
Was that one with Dalen too? Dalen Ogden?
Yes, I think so. I think
Okay.
so. And I was just like, oh, this is really fucking cool. Cause like I said, a lot of people are just like, you know, that's everyone's go-to first. I feel like when they're doing like podcasts or some kind of thing that's gonna promote something. And I really admired that a lot, because I'd like to think that's what I do as well with my
Oh,
little tiny influence.
yeah.
And so I don't know if you could you talk about that a little bit? I can't form a good question around it, but
Oh, yeah. No, this is cool. So shortly after I returned from Europe, you know, I was getting to know the owners of Mutiny Comics, Mutiny Information Cafe, Jim and Matt, and they're very supportive of anything, like anything creative that is going to add to the community. They're going to do their best to create a space for it.
absolutely.
Yeah, so I was like, I was thinking about what lessons I had learned from music, like what things I didn't know and what things I did know after 4 years of selling insurance. So I was like, okay, you know, I can create this book, but I also need other ways for people to come into contact with what I'm doing, you know. And so I was like, hey guys, what do you think of me starting a comics podcast here? And they were like, yeah, because that's how they are. You know what I'm saying? Let's do it. Right. So okay, with a podcast, I'm not interested in hearing myself talk for an hour about something, right? So I always want to do it with a guest, and you know, at this point, like Burning Metronome wasn't even really out, so nobody really kind of knew me. You know, like there was no difference to most people between me and somebody else who was like, I have an idea for a book, right?
Right.
So I just drew off people in Drink and Draw, Denver Drink and Draw, and what was interesting to me was I wanted to hear about how different kinds of people arrived at comics, like creating comics. Right. Because like I said, when I was a kid, it was just all white guys, you know, with very few exceptions. There was Brian Stelfreeze who drew Black Panther recently. He was like the only Black artist that I ever saw at a comic book convention my entire childhood. And
holy
it
cat.
was,
okay.
Yeah, and it was so rare for him to even see Black kids there that he remembered our names, me and my friend, you know. And nowadays, like I've seen him and I'm like, hey, remember us? No, I don't remember you. But back then he remembered our names, you know. But anyway, so I just tried, and I wanted to do it with an audience so that people could have questions and felt interactive. And so I think that's been happening, for like that 4 years. And one of my first interviews was with a sex worker who makes comics.
Okay.
D-Sala. Yeah, I was trying to remember like the name that she wanted to use for like her art and stuff like that. But that was a really interesting conversation because she talked about how she got into both sex work and comics.
Okay.
And I really, really enjoyed that. That one wasn't a public one because I just didn't want weird questions, you know, so me and her just had like a conversation.
Yeah.
But most of them take place before an audience. And so in terms of the kind of celebrities that I got, I was doing a partnership with a website called Nerd Team 30.
Okay.
Yeah, and I went to Wizard World in Iowa.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing about that is Wizard World has enough power to get like big names, but it's in Iowa, so there's not a lot of people there, right?
Nice. Okay.
So okay, so if David Tennant shows up at Denver Comic-Con, there's going to be 500 people in line for him, right?
Yeah.
But David Tennant,
see him on a screen in the next room.
right? But David Tennant speaking at Wizard World in Iowa, there's like 50 people in line, right?
Huh.
So Charisma Carpenter from Buffy,
Mm-hmm.
there was nobody talking to her. And I was like, hey, I host a podcast. Can we talk? And she was like, what about? You know? And so, you know, that ended up being cool. And then Nichelle Nichols from Star Trek, Uhura
Yes.
from the original Star Trek, same thing, you know, like there were very few people. And, you know, her and her publicist agreed for us to have a conversation. And I was able to ask her about her music career because she was doing that. She was doing like musicals and stuff before Star Trek and after. All the original cast of Star Trek released albums, but they're all terrible except for hers.
Except for hey, yeah. I actually really appreciate
Shatner?
No.
Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah, Leonard Nimoy. I'm like, I don't know why the names aren't coming to my head, and I'm feeling so dumb. But I actually really liked his albums.
And the Highly Illogical. You heard that song, Highly Illogical, by him? People should check it out on YouTube. It's hilarious.
Yeah, I'll have to look that one up. I know the Bilbo Baggins song.
He did a cover of If I Had a Hammer. If I Had a Hammer. Yeah.
I think I love them so much. Well, Shatner too, like the Ordinary People junk and whatnot. Yeah. I think I love them so much because they just make me laugh.
Yes, but that's not what they're supposed to do. That's the thing. So I love Shatner did an album with Ben Folds that I loved. Like it's so good. There's a song called Has Been on there that I recommend to everybody. It's so good. But you know, like so like I like Shatner for being Shatner. And I like Leonard, but in terms of like actual musical talent, and Nichelle Nichols put out like soul albums and jazz albums and stuff like that.
I am definitely checking that out. That's
Yeah, so I was like, do you still make music? And she was like, do you still breathe? You know, I was like, okay. So I have video of my interview with her, and that's just on the Motherfucker in the Cape Facebook page. So yeah, it's like I interviewed her for like 10 minutes. It wasn't like a long, in-depth thing, but it was a cool conversation, you know?
Yeah, that's really cool. I know, I remember seeing the picture on Instagram. I'm like, say what? That's so
right. Yeah, and I even brought up, she was in one blaxploitation film. She didn't have a lot to say about that. Truck Turner. Truck Turner. It was Isaac Hayes. I think it was Truck Turner. Isaac Hayes, you know, trying to make himself, because he would do the soundtracks, but then he wanted to be a star of one. And she played a madam. So she's like cussing out her stable of prostitutes. I was like, dang, get him, Uhura. You know?
Oh my goodness. Like she like flipped her role a little bit. She's
yeah,
like,
so I brought that up and she was like, that was a long time ago. Yeah.
So like this is another thing. I mean, you do all kinds of different things. It's not just the one thing.
Oh yeah.
Really?
Yeah, okay. So here's the thing. As a writer of comics, I can write a script for a single issue in a couple weeks.
Okay.
You know, sometimes less, often less. But as a comic book artist, if they're going to draw a single issue, these days single issues are 22 to 24 pages.
Okay.
It's going to take them, like it takes the pros like, you know, 3 weeks to a month to finish drawing it. Okay. The people who are like doing it in between their family and other jobs, you know, it could take them 3 to 6 months, even if they're diligent. So even when I wrote the Burning Metronome, I knew that I did not have a lot of money. And so I thought, okay, I know from hip hop that people who are creative are not very good at finishing things. So I wrote basically 4 scripts, different books, placed them with different artists, and whichever one finished, that was the one that I was going to push. And so Burning Metronome was the one that got finished. Okay. So that was my approach coming in. So then, because it takes so long, I can write something and you know, artists get caught up in their lives, man. It'll be like 6 months, sometimes never. So I just realized, okay, I just need to keep pushing things forward, because then, you know, like if 1/4 of the artist finishes things, you know, then I need to keep, like, I need to have a whole bunch of fourths, you know. Like if I have 24 projects and I get 6 back, then
you're doing pretty good.
Yeah. And so that's just where I've learned to push it. So,
Okay.
I mean, I guess, okay, so right now I have Burning Metronome 2 is on the way out.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Anguish Garden, which is a post-apocalyptic Western that's like a allegory for leaving the white supremacist movement.
Okay.
That one I kickstarted in February, and that one is like 60% done.
Okay.
And there's a free preview online. You can just Google Anguish Garden, whoever is watching. And that's the one that got me death threats on Instagram.
Right.
Yeah. So, and it's not even out. It's just the headline about it.
You're doing
Okay, so
so
that right.
right.
So that's coming out. Then I write a weekly comic for the Colorado Sun, which is called What I Miss, and that's free to read every Friday. It's free to read whenever, but a new one comes out every Friday. Corey Redford draws that one. It's about a white woman in her 50s who's been in a coma for 30 years, and a black dude in his 20s who's her next door neighbor. And they just talk about life and politics, and it's specific to Colorado. And they obviously have different perspectives, so it allows me to explore different sides of different things.
Yeah.
So that comes out weekly. Then I'm writing and drawing one called Spacism, which is an outer space comedy adventure. Then I wrote a movie a couple of years ago that is now I wrote it for my childhood friend, one of my best friends growing up, this guy, Victor Hogan, who was worked in the film industry he's been doing television and film production for like 30 years. And he was always talking about wanting to write his own movie. And, but he didn't. And so I just thought of him like I think of all the other artists who don't finish things,
Yeah.
And so maybe about 5 years ago, he was like, yo, Brooks, I wrote a script. Can you read it? Give me feedback. And I was like, sure, man, and I read it. And he had never written anything,
Yeah.
And I gave him feedback. There were a few plot holes, and I told him, and he fixed them. And I was like, well, I'll never hear about that again. And then 6 months later, that dude had made that movie.
That's awesome.
Yeah. He was like, I'm ready now. I was like, oh, you ain't playing around no more. Okay, cool. So he made it. He hired actors. He did all the production, everything. And then he went to a few festivals with it. And then he decided he wanted to do a feature length. And so he hit me up, and we plotted a script together, and then I wrote it. And that's the movie that we're pushing now. It's called Strawman. There's nothing supernatural in it. It's like it's an exploration of how violent protest and peaceful protest have worked together to create social change.
Okay.
But it's set in the context of political thriller. So, yeah. And so we had raised, we got a verbal commitment for somebody to finance the movie. Then a pandemic hit, and we were right at the point of like casting. And so that's been put on hold. So in the meantime, what we did is a web series called Making Our First Movie, where we're exploring the steps of making this movie. And I think we've done 4 episodes have been posted, and I think we'll have like maybe 5 more. And in the meantime, things are starting to go again. So
I think that's a brilliant way to build attention towards a film. That's something we don't always get privy to until like 10, 15, 20 years later, sometimes, if that is actual process surrounding the creation of a thing. So that's like very generous, I feel like.
Oh, right on.
Yeah, very generous and very like inspiring too, because like what I'm hearing is like, what things sometimes take longer than we initially think they're going to take, and it's it's okay. Like I feel like we don't live in a world that allows us to let it be okay. It's just you have to do everything now, and then if you're not, then you suck. But like and so it's really cool for me to hear this too, because sometimes things fall through your fingers for whatever reason, life stuff, whatever, headspace, pandemic,
Yeah.
And then, but that's the thing is we're still living and we're still learning and we're still in our process, even when we're not, you know, absolutely in the work.
Right.
I think we're always in the work, but I don't know. I'm starting to talk in a circle a little bit, but I just think that's such a cool thing. The YouTube series, the video series about the process of creating this film.
Oh, cool. Well, thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess the other thing that was sort of semi-led to that is I was really starting to examine why so many artists flake out on collaborations.
Mm,
Like this happened all the way through hip hop, and it definitely happens in comics. Like
mm-hmm.
people will come to me with an idea, be like, "Hey, I would love to do X, Y, and Z," and then I'll
Right.
be like, "Okay, let's do it." And then I'll like write them a script, and then they just disappear into the ether, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so like I was like, is it that they don't want to do it? Is it something with me? I was just really trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And I realized that, well, I posted something on Facebook a couple years ago just to ask,
Mm-hmm.
like what's the number one thing that stops creative people? Maybe 100 people or so responded. And all the responses were basically forms of fear. Like, I don't think it'll
Yeah.
be as good as I imagine it to be, or, just a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so I started sort of researching fear to try to figure out ways that we could get through it. So I've been teaching this seminar for overcoming creative fear.
Yes.
And I taught it at Regis, and I taught it at Hope Tank, and I've taught it at
Okay.
a few conventions. And every time people have really resonated with it. So I decided to make a video of it. So me and Victor are working on that video now.
Okay.
Because I feel like we get told that we should just basically be able to shake it off. We should just ignore it,
Right.
But the
Right.
thing is, fear is real. What it tells you isn't real, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And so like actually figuring out ways to manage it, I think are better than just being like, oh, you should just get over it.
Right.
Because for me, it's not that I don't have fear. I definitely do. It's just that I usually feel it after I make something. So like the thing gets made and then I'm like, this is terrible, but it's done,
Right. Is there one jewel that you can give us, like, as far as like, like not everyone's built that way, and I wish I was. Um, but like just one jewel of like, okay, so the fear's there. What are you gonna do about it?
Mm.
Like,
Well, one of the things I feel like is that we actually set ourselves up to fail.
mm-hmm.
So like if you're a writer and say like Toni Morrison or Hemingway are your favorite authors,
Right.
what we do is we compare our first work to our favorite author
Mm-hmm.
at their apex, right?
Right. Right.
But that's not fair because
No.
they they didn't write one thing and get to be that good. But
Right.
we're like, we're gonna write this one book and it's gonna be as good as them at their height, right? And even if it's their first book, it's not the first thing that they wrote,
Right.
because somebody had to see something that they wrote in order to want to publish them.
Right.
But in our mind, like let's say I was comparing myself to Alan Moore. I'm like, it's got to be Watchmen. My first thing is going to be as great as Watchmen, even though he had written plenty of stuff before he wrote Watchmen, right?
Right.
And the other part of that is our favorite artists have often done something afterwards that we didn't like as much,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't compare it to that, right?
Right. We
So,
just kind of put it back here somewhere.
yeah. And so like, there's just a lot of ways that we like put this weird pressure on ourselves. I mean, I think another one is that we, the reason that we want to create something is because something inspired us, right? So
Right.
usually for our first story or whatever, it's like, okay, I want to write something that spans generations and has angels and devils and other dimensional travel, and it's going to be unlike anything that's ever been written, right?
Mm.
uh,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying like don't write that story. I am saying
Right.
don't write that for your first story,
Right.
because when you like if you pick something small of your first, then you actually learn how to write, you learn how to finish.
Mm-hmm.
So like start with Luke Skywalker on the farm with Uncle Buck.
Mm-hmm.
Start there rather than starting with the entire Star Wars universe.
Right. Because I mean, that universe took a while to build. as
Yeah.
many holes as it has in it, but like
Right.
it has a lot of holes. And that, yeah, that's something folks don't talk about a lot, is like actual world building. And like, what does it take to build a world? Like, you know, like steps, like a
Yeah.
lot of steps that you put together, you know?
Right.
Um, yeah, it's like, hope the world is fully formed. And some people's brains, I know they work like that, but not everybody's, and not everyone's has to.
It's so true. Yeah. And I just feel like, we're just very hard on ourselves, like,
Yeah,
um, yeah, we don't allow ourselves time to build something and to have a body of work rather than the one thing. And when
right,
you are only doing the one thing, then that basically that one thing has the pressure of having to represent you in every aspect, which is impossible,
right.
you know? But we just put all of this, like, oh, it has to be perfect. But the thing is, you know, part of the reason I did this fear thing is I feel like all of these creative voices have something special to say about humanity and compassion. And the way that the world is right now, like, if there's any time that we should all be speaking up, it's now.
Yeah.
If there's any time that the world needs to hear your creative voice, it's now. So, let's figure out how to get past this fear and create some shit.
Um, my best friend and I talk a lot about like the upper limit issue.
Mm,
And she recommended me read this book called The Big Leap, I think it's called.
okay.
And it has a goldfish leaping out of its little fishbowl on the cover.
Okay.
And it talks about that. It talks about all these weird things that happen when we come up against this, like, it's the upper limit. So it's like we're moving towards this thing, and once we hit that point, we're like, oh shit, like, I don't know, I'm starting to freak out. Weird stuff will happen, like maybe you'll get sick, or maybe you'll
Right.
just have an anxiety attack, or maybe you'll just run away, or maybe other weird stuff, like a bunch of chaos will happen in your life kind of coincidentally or something. And It's like that upper limit thing. It's something coming in, either that you've created or something, or you've let pull you off your feet before you can get past it. And so I think about that a whole lot, because I know I've spent a lot of time at that place, like, just because who knows what the hell it looks like on the other side. And I know that for me, I get stuck there. It's like, okay, I have
Right.
all this stuff and I'm against this, and now I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna do something else now.
Mm,
And I feel like, I don't know, what you were saying reminded me of that a lot. It's like one form of that fear. And I know some of us don't even get started sometimes.
right.
I have this point Z idea, and instead of like, one of the best pieces of advice I've ever gotten in my undergrad was to give your ideas a chance.
Ah,
Um,
nice.
and Because we often shoot them down before we even, write a note
Right.
or even acknowledge it. It's like, oh, there are tons of reasons why this can't possibly work. But what if it does? And even if just trying it out, even just giving that idea a chance, even if it doesn't work, you've learned a shit ton of shit that you can apply to something else,
That's
like,
so real. It's so real.
um, and so, yeah, so I really appreciate this. Like, I really appreciate that you're talking with people about the fear part, because I don't see that happening a lot. Like, I did an MFA at Regis. I'm part of the first cohort there, the
All right
ASPE.
on.
And I did an undergrad in writing, and I've been writing on and off ever since before then too. And there's always like this, like, insecurity tied to it, and even in music, whatever creative thing. um and it's true, like that comparison of like, this is my worst but this is their best kind of thing, and it's like, I'm
Right.
comparing, that's silly.
It's
um
true. But we do it. We all do it, right? You know?
yeah, it's
But I
so
think just recognizing it is a step. Like, you know how they say, like, you have to, like, the first step is admitting you have a problem, that kind of thing.
right.
But I tell you, another thing that like motivates me is I've seen some really mediocre people
Mm.
out there
Mhm.
pushing their art, right? And I'm like, all right, if this motherfucker feels like
Mhm.
they're not ashamed of that, I know that what I have is at least as good as that. So I'm
That's
gonna,
that's real. That's
Yeah,
so real. It's like, how did this what? Why is this book here? Why is
right.
it here? And I get mad sometimes. I'm like, you know why you're mad? One of my friends, Frank Romero, told me this too. He's like, you know why you're mad? It's like,
Frank.
because
Yeah.
you should be doing your work. And I'm like, oh, shut up.
Yeah. Well,
It's
Frank,
true
listen
though.
to this. Frank has been on a year process of trying to show up to my writing group, and then and then I think he was like right there, and then the pandemic hit. So
Yeah.
we'll see if we get him.
Okay. Hopefully hopefully yeah. Um,
Right.
he's a really great thinker and a great writer too. So hopefully he'll do that.
I've heard the legends.
You've heard the legends.
Yeah. Anyway.
What else? So we talked about the movie, we talked about these multiple books, and the one that you're drawing. I did want to talk about that a little bit because I remember you showed it to me one time.
Mm.
Because I think you at the time you were waiting to hear back from some folks, and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna learn how to draw this myself.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because I got tired of waiting on artists.
Yeah.
So I mean, I did, draw until I was like 14 or 15. So
Mm-hmm.
anatomy's okay, faces aren't great. So that's the stuff I had to work harder on.
Yeah.
But the Spacism book is it is like yeah, I guess I wanted to do something with comedy. I had like basically 4 versions of this book die in other artists' hands.
Mm-hmm.
So I just decided, okay, I'm just gonna do it. And I think that'll be next year because I'm still kind of working on the script. And then my friend, my only friend who liked comics growing up, he's going to do the color for it. So
That's really fun.
yeah, so that's like a shout out to our childhood selves that we get to put a comic out.
That's exciting. That's really
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, so I'm working on a movie with one childhood friend and working on a comic with another one. So that's cool. Oh, okay. And also I'm art directing for Pop Culture Classrooms comics.
Okay.
So they do like history comics that are free for kids. And
Yeah.
so I write some scripts for them, and then I help, like get the artist, like keep them on task and stuff like that. And then I letter those comics. So we just put out a Juneteenth comic that's on their site, which
Okay.
Sarah Menzel Trapple drew. She's doing colors for my comic, Anguish Garden. And she and I are doing another like one-shot comic.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot what I called it, but it's it's a spooky supernatural thing. A woman goes to an old mall to try to reconnect with her mother. That's kind of
Okay.
what it is.
Ooh.
And then there's an artist in LA, Ryan Best, who we just agreed to work on something. So I'm gonna write a script for him soon.
Very cool.
Oh, and then Pepper DeGuca. I wrote a
Yeah.
script for Pepper.
Okay.
And so Pepper's drawing that. So 2021 should be a lot of good stuff coming out.
Yeah. You're gonna be busy again.
Oh, and then my agent, I got a literary agent off of Burning Metronome.
Mm-hmm.
My agent is pushing another book to publishers. And so we'll see if they pick it up. But it will be another graphic novel.
Very cool. Congratulations on all that.
Thanks.
Really amazing. I had something I was gonna say and I forgot.
Yeah.
Do you have what else?
What else are you doing, Alan? Why are you so
what else
busy?
are you doing?
Well, I am working on this. So my girlfriend Waneen Young, she and I were working on some music in our spare time. That's why it's going very slow because there's not a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
So she's a visual artist. She has stuff up at Redline and stuff like that.
Very cool.
And Redline is having an event at the beginning of August that I'm the keynote speaker for.
Okay.
So that should be cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, Wani and I are working on some music. Lavelle Fleming, who's a musician, bass player, he did the Burning Metronome soundtrack, which is free on YouTube. And he gave us some tracks. And so we're developing those into songs slowly but surely.
That's cool.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that might be all for right now. That's all I can think of.
That's a lot. That's really cool. Um, I don't know. Anything else you want
Oh,
to add? Or oh yeah.
yeah, I do want to say, I feel like as artists, we are often waiting for somebody to give us permission to create. Like
Hmm.
musicians are waiting for somebody to sign them until they make an album,
Hmm.
or writers are waiting for somebody to to sign into a publishing contract. But
Right.
we live in an age where technology permits us to create and distribute.
Yep.
And so we need to stop waiting on people's permission because
Yeah.
they're not looking for you. They're not, like,
Yeah.
but when you create a thing, then suddenly they can see the possibility of what you've been talking about.
Right.
So, you just got to make your things. And that's
Yeah.
part of why I have so many things going forward, because, like, this is what I want to do. So why am I waiting?
Right. Right.
And the answer is I'm not, you know?
I think that's an amazing place to end. Because yeah, I think so many folks need to hear that explicitly.
Right on.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, before we go, where
Yes.
specifically can folks go to support your work?
Oh, there's the burningmetronome.com.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see my book there. On Instagram at the Burning Metronome. And then the podcast is on iTunes. And I guess it all comes up. I'm Googleable. So if you type R. Allen Brooks, stuff will come up and you can find all the different things.
Awesome. And
Thank
that
you.
makes it easy. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for your time and also good words and inspiration and all that you do in the community. Seriously.
Well, thank you for a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I'm going to close this up. Want to stop sound?